My friends, life is a dance between fear and love, and when we're dealing with someone who carries the armor of avoidance, what we're really witnessing is a soul that learned to protect itself from pain long before it learned to receive love. An avoidant doesn't miss you the way most people do. They don't flood your phone with messages. They don't pour out their hearts in long texts. No, they retreat, they vanish, they build walls. Why? Because distance feels safe and closeness feels dangerous. But here's the miracle: when an avoidant truly misses you, something powerful happens inside them. The very pattern that once protected them begins to crack. They start doing what is unnatural for them. They take action, they reach out, and in that one small action, maybe a text, a call, a question about your day, they are breaking their own cycle of fear. That's not just contact, that's courage. Understand, this love is not proven in words, it's proven in patterns. And when someone whose default is withdrawal decides to pursue instead, it's because their soul is restless without your presence. It means the absence of you has become heavier than the fear of closeness. Think about the divine principle here: transformation always begins when pain outweighs comfort. An avoidant is comfortable in distance, but missing you shifts the balance. Suddenly, the comfort of solitude becomes the agony of separation. That's when you see the truth. That's when you see them step toward you, not because they've figured everything out, but because their spirit cannot stay silent any longer. And isn't that what love is meant to do? To awaken us, to shake us, to force us out of hiding. The greatest action an avoidant can take, the one that shows they truly miss you, is when they break their own rules and move closer. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but sincerely. So when you see this action, don't just look at the gesture. Look at the courage behind it. See the human being who is in that moment fighting decades of fear just to say, "I miss you." Because that, my friends, is love revealing itself in the most unlikely of places, inside the heart that was once too afraid to be touched. When we talk about avoidance, we need to understand the deep psychology that drives them. By nature, avoidantly attached individuals are programmed to retreat, to withdraw, to create distance as their form of safety. It's not that they don't feel emotions or that they don't value connection. Quite the opposite. They feel everything, but those feelings often feel overwhelming, unsafe, or even suffocating. So their reflex is to pull back, to protect themselves before intimacy feels like it can consume them. This is why distance becomes their default. It's familiar, it's predictable, it's how they maintain control in a world where closeness often feels like danger. But here's the paradox. For someone who values space so fiercely, the act of reaching out, of pursuing instead of retreating, becomes one of the clearest indicators that something deeper is happening inside of them. When an avoidant misses you, they don't just feel it in a casual way, they feel it in a way that disrupts their very patterns. Because to them, missing someone is not just an H of absence, it is a battle with their own identity. It challenges the story they've been telling themselves for years, that they don't need anyone, that self-sufficiency is safer than connection, that love is too risky to fully embrace. Imagine a person who has built their life on the foundation of independence, who has convinced themselves that closeness will only lead to loss or disappointment. For that person, staying distant is not just a choice, it's survival. So when they begin to pursue, when they pick up the phone and send that message, when they make the effort to cross the bridge once burned, it's not just an ordinary act. It's a rebellion against their old self. It's proof that the pull of connection with you has grown stronger than the push of their fears. This is why their pursuit is so significant. It's easy for people who are naturally secure or anxious to reach out when they miss someone. For them, closeness is comfortable, it's normal. But for an avoidant, closeness feels like a risk of exposure. So when they take that step toward you, it's a radical act. It shows that missing you has become more powerful than their need for control. It's the moment when the scales tip, when the desire for your presence outweighs the safety of their distance. It might not look dramatic on the outside. Sometimes it's just a short message. "Hey, how are you?" Sometimes it's a random call at an odd hour. Sometimes it's something even more subtle, like liking your photo, mentioning a memory, or asking a small question. But don't be fooled by the simplicity of the action. To them, it's enormous. It's a breakthrough. Because for them to shift from avoidance to pursuit, they must override the very mechanism that has kept them safe their entire lives. Think about the courage it takes. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's action in spite of fear. For the avoidant, pursuing you is an act of courage because it goes against their conditioning. They are risking vulnerability. They are risking rejection. They are risking the very thing they've been running from: intimacy. And yet in that moment, the magnetic pull of missing you is stronger than all of those fears combined. This is why, when an avoidant misses you and shows it through pursuit, you're witnessing more than just longing. You're witnessing transformation. You're seeing a person begin to confront their own defenses. You're seeing the possibility of healing begin to unfold. Because the truth is, every time an avoidant chooses closeness over distance, They're taking one step closer to breaking free from the prison of their own protection. And that is not only a sign they miss you, it's a sign that love is reaching them in a way it never has before. Emotional vulnerability is one of the hardest things for an avoidant to express. By design, their attachment style has trained them to hide their deepest feelings even from themselves. They learned, often very early in life, that showing emotions invited disappointment, rejection, or even shame. So they built walls, they crafted masks, they taught themselves to keep their world tightly controlled, where emotions are neatly contained and intimacy never runs too deep. For them, love can feel like quicksand. It pulls them in, but at the same time, it terrifies them because they fear losing themselves. That's why vulnerability is avoided at all costs. Yet, when an avoidant truly misses you, cracks begin to appear in that armor, and those cracks reveal something profound: their humanity. You'll notice it in subtle ways at first. The person who once kept conversations surface level suddenly lets something slip that feels more personal. They might say they've been thinking about you, or admit they're struggling with something, or even reveal a piece of their past they had kept locked away. These may seem like small moments, but for an avoidant, they're monumental. Vulnerability doesn't come easily to them. It feels dangerous, like walking into a battlefield unarmed. And yet, when missing you stirs something deeper within them, they begin to risk those small disclosures because the pain of holding back becomes heavier than the fear of opening up. This is what makes their vulnerability such a powerful signal. For an avoidant, showing feelings is not casual. It's a conscious, almost reluctant act of surrender. It means the wall they've relied on for so long is no longer impenetrable. And here's the deeper truth: vulnerability is the language of love. It's the bridge that allows two people to meet heart to heart instead of just mind to mind. So when an avoidant begins to let their vulnerability surface, it's a sign that they are not only missing you, but they are starting to value the connection more than their defenses. Think about the courage this takes. To be vulnerable is to risk rejection, to risk being misunderstood, to risk being hurt again. For someone who has built an identity around being self-reliant and emotionally contained, this risk feels massive. And yet when they begin to show you even glimpses of their true feelings, it's because their longing for closeness has begun to outweigh the safety of distance. It's because missing you has awakened something deeper, the realization that life without you feels emptier than the discomfort of vulnerability. And here's where divine wisdom comes into play. Every soul, no matter how guarded, craves to be seen and known. We were not created to live behind walls forever. We were created to connect, to love, to share the fullness of who we are. Vulnerability is the doorway to that truth. When an avoidant shows it, they're not just communicating that they miss you, they're demonstrating that their spirit is being stirred toward its higher purpose. They're inching closer to the part of themselves that longs to be free from fear and closer to love. What's fascinating is that vulnerability often sneaks out in unexpected ways. It may appear as a random confession late at night, or a soft admission in the middle of an argument, or even a simple phrase like, "I don't know what I'd do without you." To most people, these moments might seem small or fleeting, but for the avoidant, they are milestones. They represent an inner shift. They show that missing you has unlocked something their defenses could no longer keep hidden. This is why vulnerability is sacred. When someone who is wired to conceal finally allows their emotions to be seen, it's not just a moment of weakness. It's a moment of strength. It's a declaration that love has reached them, that the absence of your presence has left a space they cannot deny, that their heart, no matter how guarded, still beats with a longing for connection. And when that happens, when they show you even a glimpse of that vulnerability, it's a sign that what you share is not just another relationship. It's a relationship that has the power to transform them at their core. Consistency is the language of trust, and for someone with an avoidant attachment style, consistency is often the hardest thing to give. Their natural rhythm is one of push and pull, moments of closeness followed by periods of withdrawal. This cycle creates confusion and often leaves the people around them questioning whether they truly care. But when an avoidant genuinely misses you, something begins to shift in this rhythm. Instead of sporadic gestures or random appearances, they start showing up with more regularity. They don't just drop breadcrumbs of attention, they begin offering a steady presence that wasn't there before. That consistency is not an accident, it is a sign of longing turning into action. Think about the psychology behind this shift. An avoidant craves autonomy, freedom, and space. They want to feel like no one controls them, like they are untouchable and independent. Their inconsistency has often been their shield. It keeps others guessing, keeps them in control, and ensures they never feel too exposed. Yet when the absence of someone they love becomes too heavy, their old pattern no longer satisfies, they realize that random gestures won't bridge the gap. That's when they begin to create patterns of consistency, because deep down, they know that to keep you in their world, they must show up in a way that goes beyond their normal habits. This consistency can show up in simple but powerful ways. Maybe they start checking in every day, even if it's with small messages. Maybe they initiate conversations more regularly, not just when they feel lonely or when it's convenient. Maybe they begin to plan things ahead instead of keeping everything last minute. These behaviors may not seem monumental to someone else, but for an avoidant, they represent an intentional decision to step out of their comfort zone. Consistency requires commitment, and commitment requires vulnerability. So when they become consistent, it means they are choosing connection over self-protection. What makes this so transformative is that consistency is how love takes root. Love is not built on grand gestures, it's built on repeated actions that signal reliability and safety. And that's precisely why an avoidance consistency is such a powerful indicator of missing you. They aren't just reaching out because they feel a momentary wave of loneliness. They are reaching out because they want to sustain the bond. They want to create continuity to keep you tethered to them in a way that doesn't fade when their fear resurfaces. It's their way of saying, I want you in my life, not just in moments, but as a presence. Consistency also requires them to face their deepest fear, the loss of control. Inconsistency allows them to dictate the pace of closeness. It keeps things on their terms. But when they step into consistency, they surrender some of that control because they are now showing up in ways you can rely on. That is no small shift. It means they are willing to risk the very thing they've tried to avoid, the possibility of being depended on, the possibility of needing you as much as you need them. And in that surrender, there is transformation. At its core, consistency from an avoidant is a sign of emotional awakening. It reveals that missing you has created a hunger in them that sporadic contact cannot satisfy. They realize that your presence brings a sense of wholeness they can't manufacture in solitude. They recognize that connection with you gives their life a depth that isolation never could. And so, instead of pulling away after every moment of closeness, they choose to lean in again and again. This is the power of consistency. It's not just about showing up, it's about choosing you repeatedly, even when fear whispers in their ear. It's about rewriting the old pattern of withdrawal and replacing it with a new rhythm of reliability. And when an avoidant begins to live in that rhythm, you are witnessing more than just a person who misses you. You are witnessing someone learning how to love with presence, with steadiness, with courage. And that is the truest sign that you matter to them in a way that has pierced through the walls they once thought were unbreakable. Subtle bids for connection are one of the most overlooked yet powerful signals that an avoidant truly misses you. By nature, avoidants don't always express their feelings in direct, overt ways. They rarely come forward with grand declarations like, I can't stop thinking about you, or I miss you so much it hurts. That level of openness feels too exposing, too vulnerable. Instead, they rely on small, almost disguised gestures to test whether the door to connection is still open. These bids may appear casual, even insignificant on the surface, but underneath them lies a longing they struggle to express outright. You'll often notice these bids in everyday interactions. An avoidant might comment on something you posted online, not because the comment itself is meaningful, but because it's their way of signaling presence. They may send a random message asking about something trivial like a recommendation for a movie, or reminding you of a shared memory. They might even initiate light conversation with no real agenda, just to feel out whether you are still available to them emotionally. These gestures may look like nothing more than surface-level contact, but in reality, they're emotional probes, small attempts to bridge the distance without diving headfirst into vulnerability. Why do they approach connection in such a subtle way? Because for an avoidant, the fear of rejection is magnified. To them, asking directly for closeness feels like handing over too much power, like putting their heart in someone else's hands without a guarantee of safety. So they test the waters, they send out tiny signals to see if you respond. If you do, it reassures them. If you don't, they can retreat without feeling as though they've fully exposed their longing. It's a protective strategy, but it also reveals the deep internal conflict they face, the desire for connection battling against the fear of closeness. These bids for connection often carry more weight than they appear. A casual, how's your day going, may sound like nothing, but for an avoidant, it represents the internal wrestling match between withdrawal and approach. They wouldn't bother to reach out at all if they didn't feel your absence. The fact that they are initiating, even in small ways, shows that their need for your presence is overriding their instinct to detach. In other words, what looks like a simple text or offhand comment is often the avoidance way of saying, I miss you, but I don't know how to say it directly. It's important to understand that these gestures are not manipulations, they are compromises. They are the avoidance way of balancing their deep emotional needs with their deep emotional fears. They want to reconnect, but they need to do it in a way that feels safe. These small bids create just enough closeness to ease the ache of missing you while still allowing them to keep their defenses intact. That's why they matter so much. They're not just habits, they're signals of emotional investment. When you notice these subtle bids, you're witnessing the quiet language of an avoidant heart. You're seeing someone who may not be able to put their emotions into words, but who is still choosing to reach toward you instead of away from you. That choice, however understated, is powerful, because each time they make it, they are breaking their own cycle, creating new patterns and inching closer to a form of connection that feels more authentic and enduring. Over time, these subtle gestures can build momentum. If they feel safe and understood in response to their small bids, they may begin to open up more directly. Vulnerability doesn't always arrive in one dramatic wave. It often begins with drops of trust that grow into something larger. And for the avoidant, those drops come in the form of subtle questions, random check-ins, and casual gestures that disguise their true weight. So when you see these behaviors, don't underestimate them. They may look like passing moments, but they carry profound meaning. They are proof that missing you has stirred something powerful enough to push past the walls of avoidance. They are proof that the need for connection has grown stronger than the need for distance. And ultimately, they are proof that, even if they can't yet say it outright, their heart is reaching for yours in the only way it knows how. When it comes to avoidance, words are rarely their strongest expression of love or longing. They may find it difficult to articulate what they truly feel because putting emotions into language feels like surrender, like stepping into a territory where they have no control. That's why, when they miss you, their actions often speak far louder than their words. Instead of pouring out their feelings in long conversations, they demonstrate their care through what they do. The way they act becomes the truest indicator of what's happening inside their hearts. Actions can appear in many different forms. It may be as simple as showing up when you didn't expect them to, offering help when you need it most, or remembering small details you mentioned in passing and bringing them back to you. These behaviors may seem ordinary, but for an avoidant, they are extraordinary. They represent an intentional decision to invest energy in the relationship, to break from their pattern of self-preservation and to give of themselves in tangible ways. This is how an avoidant says, "I miss you," without using those words. There's a deep wisdom in this. Words can be fleeting. Anyone can say them without meaning them. But actions require effort, sacrifice, and follow through. When an avoidant takes that step, choosing to act in alignment with their feelings rather than just burying them, it signals that missing you has pushed them beyond passivity. It means the longing they feel is not something they can suppress anymore. It has translated into behavior that requires vulnerability, risk, and exposure. And that's what makes their actions so significant. For example, they might start creating opportunities to be around you, even if they frame it casually. They may offer to fix something for you, accompany you somewhere, or step in to make your life easier in some small way. At first glance, it may look like they are just being practical, but at its core, it's their way of showing they care, that your absence has been felt, and that they want to bridge the gap with contribution rather than words. Their instinct tells them that doing is safer than saying, but the intention behind the doing is unmistakable. It is love expressed in motion. There's also a deeper spiritual principle at play here. Love is not merely an emotion, it is action. It is sacrifice, it is presence, it is choosing another person even when it's uncomfortable. When an avoidant acts out of missing you, they are stepping into that principle without even realizing it. They are embodying the truth that the most powerful declarations of love aren't spoken, they're lived. And in those moments, their actions become divine reminders that even the most guarded hearts cannot silence what they feel forever. These actions also reveal growth. An avoidant who misses you could easily stay stuck in silence, letting fear dictate their choices. But when they decide to act, they are moving beyond fear into courage. Courage doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it looks like sending a message first, driving across town just to see you, or making an effort to maintain a tradition you once shared. Each of these small acts is a rebellion against their avoidance, a step toward love, and an acknowledgement that connection matters more than comfort. The important thing to recognize is that these actions are not random, they are chosen. They reflect intentionality. An avoidant will not go out of their way for someone they don't value. Their very nature pushes them to conserve their emotional energy, to protect themselves from unnecessary vulnerability. So when they choose to act, it is evidence of significance. It is proof that missing you has reached a depth where silence is no longer an option. When you pay attention to these moments, you realize that love doesn't always arrive in dramatic confessions. Sometimes it arrives in quiet gestures, the cup of coffee they bring you, the way they check in when you're sick, the effort they put into fixing something they know matters to you. These may not come wrapped in poetic words, but they are the most honest signals of all. They show that behind the silence, behind the distance, behind the fear, is a heart that cannot stop reaching for you. One of the clearest signs that an avoidant truly misses you is when they begin to let go of the very thing that has defined their way of relating to others: control. Control is the foundation of their emotional safety. They use it to manage how close others can get, how much of themselves they reveal, and when they allow connection to happen. It gives them the illusion of security, the belief that if they hold the reins tightly enough, they will never be hurt, abandoned, or engulfed by someone else's needs. But when the ache of missing you grows too strong that control begins to slip, they risk breaking their own rules, stepping into territory that once felt threatening, and in that moment, they are revealing something profound. Their need for you has grown greater than their need for safety. This shift often shows up in small but meaningful ways. An avoidant who usually takes days to reply might suddenly respond quickly. Someone who once avoided making plans might initiate them. A person who typically keeps emotions locked away might suddenly admit, "I was thinking about you." These changes may look minor, but in reality, they represent the surrender of control. Each action is an acknowledgement that the distance they've used as a shield no longer satisfies them. Missing you has stirred a longing that overrides their defenses. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, giving up control is deeply uncomfortable. It goes against everything their nervous system has been wired to believe. Their entire identity is often built on self-sufficiency, on being the one who decides how much closeness they allow. Control feels like safety, and safety feels like survival. So when they let go of that control, when they step toward you without knowing how you'll respond, they are engaging in one of the bravest acts they can take. They are risking rejection, vulnerability, and dependence, all for the chance to reconnect with you. That risk is a powerful sign that they miss you in a way that silence can no longer contain. The deeper truth is that control is a form of protection, but it's also a form of imprisonment. It may keep pain out, but it also keeps love out. When an avoidant loosens their grip, they begin to taste something they've been unconsciously starving for: freedom. Freedom not in the sense of detachment, but in the sense of finally allowing themselves to feel. When they let themselves take the risk of connection, they are no longer ruled by fear. They are allowing their soul to choose love over defense. And that choice, even in small moments, is a sign that missing you has awakened them to a greater desire for intimacy than they have ever allowed before. This breaking of control doesn't always look clean or polished. Sometimes it's messy. They may reach out and then pull back. They may admit feelings and then grow distant again. But the very act of breaking their old pattern is evidence of change. It's a signal that the old way of surviving no longer feels enough. Their heart is pushing them into unfamiliar territory because the cost of staying guarded is now greater than the risk of opening up. Missing you has shaken their foundation, and in the cracks of that foundation, love has a chance to take root. When you witness this, you are seeing the most authentic part of them emerge. Beneath the armor, beneath the need for control, there is a longing to be close, to be understood, to be held. That longing may have been buried for years, but it doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits for the moment when fear is no longer stronger than desire. And when that moment comes, it looks like an avoidant stepping outside of their fortress, hands trembling, heart unsteady, yet willing to risk it all for the chance to say through their actions, "I need you." That is why the breaking of control is such a profound sign. It is not casual, not accidental. It is a spiritual surrender, a quiet rebellion against the fear that once defined them. It is proof that missing you has awakened a force inside them stronger than avoidance itself. And when that happens, it is no longer just about longing. It is about transformation. It is about a heart learning, maybe for the first time, that real love requires letting go. And so, my friends, when we look at the avoidant who begins to reach out, who shows cracks of vulnerability, who becomes consistent, who sends those subtle bids for connection, who chooses actions over empty words, and who finally surrenders their need for control, we are witnessing something far greater than simple longing. We are witnessing the triumph of love over fear. Missing you becomes the spark that awakens a guarded heart, teaching them that closeness is not a threat but a gift, that connection is not weakness but strength. And that is the message for all of us. Love has the power to melt even the hardest armor, to call forth the most hidden parts of the soul, and to remind us that we were created not to live behind walls, but to live in the fullness of presence and connection. Thank you for opening your hearts, for choosing to grow, and for allowing these words to serve as a reminder of the unstoppable force of love in all of our lives.